We are one of 8 neighborhood and community associations that work together to bring you all this Sacramento County Supervisor District 1 Forum. These forums are one example of what neighborhood associations can do. So we all really encourage you, get involved with your local neighborhood or community association.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Lisa, and I am here from the Tahoe Park Neighborhood Association. Hello. Do we have any Tahoe Park people in the house? We do. Back there. Yes. Woo! I really am so happy to have been able to work on this committee. And, you know, Maggie really brings up a good point, that if you're not currently involved in your neighborhood association or volunteering locally, please look for opportunities. It's a wonderful way to get involved. I really want to share thanks to the Coloma Center for allowing us this beautiful space, and their generosity with helping us and helping our candidates set up has been really helpful, because then we did not have to do it all. So thank you.
I'm Sarah Cox with the Southside Park Neighborhood Association. And I want to give a shout out and thanks to Access Sacramento for filming and live streaming and rebroadcasting the forum tonight.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Noah. I'm from the Boulevard Park Neighborhood Association. I would like to give thanks to CAP Radio for their coverage of the event, and also to all of the Neighborhood Association volunteers who helped make this event happen.
Good evening. I'm Tricia Stevens with the East Sacramento Community Association. Yay! And I want to give a big thanks to the League of Women Voters for moderating this event tonight. And as a side note, East Sacramento, if you're in the East Sacramento community, it's in Congressional District 6, not 7, but 6. And we're having a congressional forum on April 22nd in Natomas area. We're partnering with the Natomas Neighborhood Associations, and there's some flyers in the back. So if you're in East Sacramento, District 6.
Thank you. Thank you. So once again, if you want to have a conversation, even whisper to somebody, please go all the way outside, not in the foyer. That's a silent zone. Bathrooms are out in the foyer. The only potable water is down this hallway in a drinking fountain, so don't drink any other water in the building. And I want to just give a shout out to the volunteers on the E&A, especially Francesca and Carrie, who really helped with putting this together. And a shout out to Crest Vellucci, who helped with the press release. And with that, I will turn it over to Paula Lee. Thank you.
Thank you, neighborhood associations. I know it was a lot of work putting this on. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Candidate Forum for Sacramento County Board of Supervisors, District 1. I'm Paula Lee, a member of the League of Women Voters of Sacramento County, and tonight's moderator. The League is a nonpartisan, nonprofit political association, all volunteers, men and women. Our mission is to encourage participation in government through education and advocacy. The League does not support, oppose, or evaluate candidates or political parties. However, we are a political organization, and we do take positions on public policy issues, including ballot measures and legislation. We take these positions based on our thorough studies and consensus process. So if you're interested in helping to make democracy work, if you're interested in public policy at any level of government, please consider joining the all-volunteer Sacramento League. We're open to everyone. We have active committees working on voter education and engagement, homelessness and housing, criminal justice, climate change, and ranked choice voting. The questions tonight were solicited in advance from the community. We received well over 40 questions. We won't be able to ask all of them. But we do try to cover as many issues and themes as possible that were raised in the questions, and we try to avoid redundancy. The candidates for Supervisor District 1 in alphabetical order are Flo Cofer, Guerra, Deborah Ortiz, and Tim Riley. We drew cards for speaking order, and that's the order that they're seated in now. That's how we measure fairness. Each candidate will make a 1.5-minute opening statement. They'll have a 1.5 minutes to respond to the questions, but I've asked them if they can respond to them in a minute or less. That's good too. Some questions take longer and some don't, and it means we can get in more questions. The league's timekeeper tonight is our league intern from Sac State, Evelyn, right there. So candidates, hold those up. Keep your eye on her. She will let you know when you have 30 seconds to go, and that's quite a long time, but it reminds you that, wind it up, and when you have to stop. And please pay attention to the stop sign. She's a little hard to see. And I'll be rotating who answers the questions first. Now, I want to thank the candidates for being here tonight and answering the questions from these voters. And I'm going to take a little moment here. I haven't done this before, but I want to explain to voters what your job is, a little bit about your job, or what you're responsible for. I don't think people realize that when you're elected to the Board of Supervisors in Sacramento County, you're dealing with a $9.2 billion, that's with a B, dollar budget. And that you're running for supervisor to represent the people in District 1, but you're also representing all the residents of Sacramento County. The responsibilities in the county are really enormous. The county is responsible for elections, managing the whole electoral process. They're responsible for law enforcement, providing public safety, sheriff's department, and other law enforcement agencies. They're responsible for public health, overseeing all the health services, including disease prevention and health education. Responsible for social services, support programs for families, children, and vulnerable populations. And they take care of property records. They manage our property records, including taxes and assessments, and they collect those. They also are responsible for the unincorporated areas. Those are the areas that are not formed cities, and they provide municipal services for those areas like waste management, road maintenance, community development, and support for those cities or areas that do not have city councils. Okay, now you know more about what they're going to be doing. We begin with an opening statement from Deborah Ortiz.
Good evening, and thank you for having us here tonight. Many have asked why I am running for the Board of Supervisors. Let me share with you, I could not sit back and watch the Trump administration destroy everything that I and so many others built that protects your health. I was the vice president of America's largest Planned Parenthood affiliate. I also led the California Primary Care Association's team to implement Obamacare in California. Now, the Trump administration is closing Planned Parenthood clinics and remains hell-bent on destroying Obamacare. As a state senator, I created the California Department of Public Health, and lives were saved during COVID. I wrote the law that made stem cell research legal when the federal government was trying to criminalize it. Now, many cancers and diseases are being cured. But the Trump administration is allowing Robert Kennedy Jr. to tear down our public health systems and shut down cancer research. Today, I serve as the president of our local community college system. We're graduating more nurses and healthcare workforce than ever before. On the Board of Supervisors, I can improve the public's health and protect all that I have worked for and many of us have built together. I'm all in. That's personal.
Tim Riley.
Hello, neighbors. My name is Tim Riley. For 20 years, I worked at my Sacramento home programming the research databases at the Everglades National Park near Miami. Today, I'm a candidate to represent District 1 on our Board of Supervisors. Our county needs Sacramento dorms. I envision a 5,000-room homeless dormitory with an environment of education. Each room will be supplied with self-study tutorials. Sacramento dorms will have a study hall staffed with tutors, and the tutors will have social science degrees. We need a 5,000-cell bigger jail. Our old jail is too small and deemed cruel punishment by a federal court. The new jail will also be in an environment of education. The third leg of the stool is Sacramento Community College. Tuition and books will be free. The primary lesson at the school will be to learn how to learn. Of course, to build, manage, staff, supply, and maintain 3 big buildings located downtown will be expensive. It's now a pipe dream. So I dissected the latest county budget and posted a funding plan at timriley.net. As you can see, I value my time is up, and I will respect that.
Thank you, Tim. Flo Cofer.
My name is Dr. Flo Cofer, and I'm running for county supervisor because this moment demands expertise, skill, and courage to lead through instability, have difficult conversations, and to believe that we can do better than we're currently doing. I got into public health because my father died at 47 from heart disease due to smoking, and I committed my life to making sure that never happened. Now, we can't blame all of the county's issues on Trump because we've watched as the county mismanaged the jail, homelessness, COVID-19, and land use. But now on top of that, we have a federal government that's put our health care, food, housing, and safety in jeopardy. And we have to take bold action now to address both of those issues. None of this happens without collaboration, something I've spent my entire career doing. Decreasing infant mortality 14% statewide, and also making sure that birth control was included after the ACA passed with no cost. And serving on local commissions for active transportation, Measure U, climate change, and sheriff oversight. If elected, I intend to work with every single member of the board, and I've already begun those conversations about a public bank and strengthening internal county staffing and proactive public safety solutions in health and human services. Because what we have to do right now is build coalitions that actually move policy forward. And we also have to make sure that we're taking care of our unincorporated counties because we're their only local government and they need infrastructure, services, and deserve prioritization. Sacramento County has a leadership gap, and more of the same won't fix it. My public health expertise, organizing background, and commitment to bridge building position me to help fill that gap, and that's why I'd love to earn your vote. Thank you.
Eric Guerra.
Thank you. Well, first, I love Sacramento, and I'm grateful for Sacramento. See, I grew up on the other side of this river here as a migrant farm worker. You know, it's hard it is to believe at the age of 5, I was working 12-hour days in the sun with my family. We know hard work and for poverty wages, and we know hunger. When I first came to Sacramento, I found myself living in my car on a parking lot on Del Paso Boulevard, and I came too familiar with the issue of fear every single night. But even as difficult as that first year was, Sacramento gave me an opportunity to start a career, to meet my beautiful wife, to start a family with 2 energetic young kids, and to finally own a home. Well, I'm running for county supervisor because I see that opportunity not there for my kids and fleeting today for young people with the issue on the street of mental health, drug addiction, the cost of affordability of housing, and the need to strengthen our local economy. My strength has always been listening, and listening with people who don't agree with me for the purpose of finding outcome and results for our neighbors. I'm proud of my record of working with community, with many of you here today. You know, as a neighborhood association leader, that's how I started, and that's who I am today. And because of our collective work, we've been able to build affordable housing, tackle human trafficking, improve our neighborhoods. And I'll take that same approach of listening to the County Board of Supervisors. I'd be honored to earn your vote.
Thank you. No clapping, please. Okay, we begin with Deborah Ortiz for the first question. Natomas farmland is relied upon for species protected by the Natomas Basin Habitat Conservation Plan. Developers want to build 30,000 homes on this land, even though the county has approved 62,000 houses to be built elsewhere. Do you support these proposals, Upper West Side, Providence, and Grand Park?
So no, I do not support them. Upper West Side as well as Grand Park have been identified by the county outside the urban service boundary. They are reliant upon conditions where they get water from the city, which the city has not agreed to. It violates a longstanding agreement between the city and county not to develop in those areas. There are significant federal and state challenges from Department of Wildlife, et cetera, for species as well as habitat protection. So at this point, based on what I know, I would not support either project.
The Upper West Side Development Project is an abomination. Supervisor Cerna's friends with the developer have pushed this through the county process. The east coast of the Sacramento River is a mile-wide habitat corridor destined to be restored back for wildlife. The Upper West Side development is located in the wildlife corridor. It should not even be considered. Secondly, it's a violation of the Endangered Species Act. The development plan, which allocated the funds to purchase the wildlife corridor, have designated, was approved in 2002 because the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Commission department approved it. And the development is going to be in violation of the Endangered Species Act.
You know, when I said in my opening statement that the county has mismanaged land use, this is exactly what I'm talking about, because you're absolutely right. We have an urban services boundary, and once we set it, we set good plans in place to be able to say it is important that we develop inside here for the benefit of the people who live here and also for the protection of our environment. And yet, as soon as that happened, we had developers in this region who went and bought up that farmland that could not be used for development and then said, we'll go and buy some politicians. And unfortunately, Sacramento, that works too often. We buy politicians and convince them to do the bidding of people who are not operating in our best interest. I'm a public health professional. I'm not going to be bought and sold. Corporate PAC money, because I want to make sure that I represent you, because we only have one planet. We're all watching Artemis circle the moon, looking down on Earth and reminding ourselves we have to be good stewards of our environment right now. So no, I'm not in support of projects that violate the hard work we've done to already say we need to protect our environment. There are plenty of other places to build and plenty of places that we've already designated and projects we've already approved. What we need to be doing is moving those projects towards development instead of approving new projects in places we already told us we cannot build because it's bad for our health, our well-being, and our communities.
I'm the only one here who actually has taken a vote against Upper West Side and that development. And I spoke up at council about the issues with traffic and the issues that it faces the cities. Now, I take the approach of moving and meeting with people. I met with people in Natomas, and the frustration that they had knowing now that when they, also the issue of not working with the schools. The fact is that a new development would require new elementary schools when they needed an additional high school, and parents feeling that that was not part of the solution. Now, you'll see here today, even if any of us were elected and we stopped a project right now, the big issue, and why is this driving? It's the lack of housing, the housing affordability issue. So what I think about is making sure that you take action to do infill housing. I've taken that approach on Stockton Boulevard. I've taken that approach by leading policies that help make it easier to build infill. I've done it as a county planning commissioner before I was a council member, supporting affordable housing in the unincorporated areas of Watt Avenue, where there's public transit. Even today, I led that conversation on the bus rapid transit system, making housing and transit and infill. All you have to do is take a drive down Stockton Boulevard and see the collective work I've done with our community, with our businesses, to build housing, to build transit, and deal with the issue of that pressure of housing.
Tim Riley, how would you approach the county climate action plan and help Sacramento prepare for and adapt to extreme weather conditions, excessive heat and flooding in particular? And how would you secure the necessary resources?
We're going to face a cataclysmic crisis. The CO2 concentrations in our atmosphere have never exceeded 300 parts per million for hundreds of thousands of years. In 1950, it started increasing exponentially. Now the CO2 concentration in our atmosphere is 420 parts per million. The last time the CO2 concentration was this high, Florida was underwater. South Carolina, the coast of South Carolina, was inland 60 miles. When climate change when humans finally feel the effect of climate change via the ocean levels increasing, there's going to be a massive migration from the east to the west. And Sacramento County is in a prime location to not have the effects of the ocean level increases. So we are going to be a prime target for the huge migration that is going to take place.
So this is an area where I think my expertise sets me aside in this field of candidates, because I was in charge statewide for our emergency response plan review for 4 years, starting in 2021 through 2025. And part of what I was looking at was the fact that most of our emergency response plans haven't been updated since before the iPhone was created, which means that there's a lot that is in the way of us actually being able to execute them. And so I'm aware that when we have a climate action plan, we can't just approve plans and sit them aside. And in fact, 350 Sacramento and some of our ECOS and some of our other environmental advocacy organizations were just at the county a few weeks ago saying, you put this plan together, but you've taken absolutely no action to enact it. Having plans that sit on the shelf are not actually helping us. They are making things work. And we do this with our general plan. We do this with our climate action plan. So my commitment is that in every single budget, we're going to set aside some money and we're going to say, what are the 3 things we're going to do this year, or 5? We're going to pick and prioritize, because we're wasting the time and energy of people who are our volunteers, who serve on some of our boards and commissions. We're wasting the time of our staff that put together these good plans if we don't ever enact them. And then when the emergency comes, we act flabbergasted by the idea that we're not prepared because we didn't do the planning that we already identified we needed to do. So the time to sit back and pretend that status quo is going to work is over. I'm a person who takes things that are plans and puts them into action, and you'll be able to point to that and be able to say, this is what we're doing this year, and this is what we'll commit to doing next year.
I'm very proud of my environmental record, and actually after seeing my son have his first asthma attack, the issue of vehicle emissions and carbon that's affecting us is all too real. But not only that, on the issue of what I've done, I've actually voted on the city, not the county, but the city's climate action plan that has been working. In fact, the housing that we just built is all electric to avoid the use of those carbon emissions, to do our part in that. Because of my environmental record as chair of the Air District in our Sacramento County, we met for the first time in history. What was not thought attainable was meeting our federal air quality standards, which is the baseline point. But I brought Republicans and Democrats, our conservative members in other counties, to have an aggressive plan on trying to reduce those emissions. And because of that record, the governor appointed me to the California Air Resources Board, where I've taken that effort and that led that effort on changing our carbon statewide. I'm working right now with farmers in the northern 9 counties to make sure that we're looking at eliminating ag burning in a way where we're capturing that carbon as well, nature's own carbon sequestration, and helping farmers to make sure that they don't have to pull out their orchards, because when we pull out orchards, land cheap, and when land becomes cheap, that's when it gets developed. We need to protect our farmers and our security to do that. I'm actively doing that not only at the local level, at the state level, and I'm proud to help lead the way to make the largest electric school bus fleet in the nation, Twin Rivers, and the second largest one, Elk Grove Unified.
I reviewed the county's climate action plan. It is a pretty comprehensive document. They revise it every year. They assess whether or not the state is new requirements for particularly development in built communities. For those who haven't seen it, there are various elements, open space, materials used on structures that are, developed, buildings. It also includes roadways. It looks at energy sources, moving away from gas to electricity. And it presumably should be the document that every project that is adopted or considered by the county has to be weighed against that, and every report should address the elements of that. I don't know what the county has done. They clearly did not apply those elements to Coyote Creek or to some of the other proposed projects. It is pretty detailed, and should be a guidepost, and it should be measured, and the public should have access to assess whether or not the county is complying with its own climate action plan. You asked about where we could get resources. It's a sensitive issue, but developers have fees for many things: school impact fees, park districts, roadways, infrastructure. There should be a consideration that there should be a climate action plan mitigation fee included in those developer projects, but we also have to be cognizant of balancing the fees that doesn't impede our effort to build affordable housing.
Flo Cofer. The federal administration has violated civil rights and liberties for our immigrant communities. What changes in our county, if any, do you believe are necessary to ensure immigration enforcement policies and practices are lawful and accountable to the communities they impact?
Yeah, first and foremost, we are watching at a time when this is happening, and it is devastating to our communities. And what it means is that it's far-reaching implications. It means people are not coming in for the health care that they need. They're not accessing the services that they're eligible for, that there is a chilling effect and people are afraid. And so one of the things that you will get from me as your next county supervisor is a clear commitment to making sure that we have policies where we are not cooperating with the federal government to share information that we are not supposed to be sharing, that we have clear policies about whether or not if ICE officers show up on spaces and when we're doing work, that we're going to make sure we protect our local communities. But we also have a responsibility to make sure that people still have due process, that we are investing dollars from our budget to make sure that people are with their families, that they're getting appropriate representation, that we're supporting the network of organizations that we have, that we're not sitting back as some of my opponents have said, the Fuel Network has plenty of money, they're fine, this network doesn't need additional dollars. No, we need to be fighting to make sure that our city and our county are putting dollars in to make sure that we're supporting our immigrant communities, because that is essential to our functioning. We often tout ourselves as one of the most diverse communities in the country, and we can't say that and then leave our immigrant communities without the protection of their local government, which is the last line of defense when we can't depend on the federal government.
First, I grew up, I know this all too well, I grew up as an undocumented immigrant here with my family, and in the 80s, we were deported as well during that time because of immigration, hate that was used as a tool for hate. Okay, we know what that's like. We know how it is to be targeted. I know what it's like to be targeted. And to hear that hate with my friends and classmates growing up, this is exactly why when the first Trump administration, I haven't waited to run for office or anything else, but since the first Trump administration, I helped create and started the Fuel Network and got funding every year for legal services and legal education for immigrants, refugees, and asylees. And we've grown that, and even now raising private dollars to support that, because that's what people need today to fight back also with the administration, with the attorney. Also, I had the city also sue the administration. I would have the county join, number one, the Fuel Network, do their part in joining that county-wide. Second, participate in those legal cases against the administration for violations of the Constitution. Then third, one thing I'm already working on already is creating a policy not only for our Head Start child centers, but also our other child care centers to create a protocol, a lockdown protocol, so ICE agents can't come in and either for a worker or for a child to be used as bait, as is seen in other places. And finally, also here, I know that we have to invest in our kids. That's why I was the architect of the California Dream Act when I was in the legislature. I helped draft that with the senator I was working for, supporting our youth.
This is one of the most incredibly painful and very personal experience I've seen in my lifetime. When I see my community being hunted like animals on the street because of their last name, because of the way they look, because of the way they speak, or where they work, I hope history looks back and asks every one of us what we did at this time. What do I think the county should do at a minimum? Clearly, not collaborate with law enforcement, not share information, ensure that the jail does not disclose information of persons but not yet convicted. They should go beyond that. I had a conversation with people in the city and said, please do a 1-800 hotline. Please enter an agreement with the county, sheriff's department, with the police department that you will affirm that you will not share information, you will not hunt down brown people. Do I think we can do more? Absolutely. We as individuals, at the beginning of this horror, talking about how to create guardianship agreements with parents who fear that their children will be yanked out of their arms. We should have underground places where we open up our homes. This is not hypothetical. This is dystopian, it's horrific, and it's personal. So yeah, we should all be doing a hell of a lot more.
ICE is bad. We've got the Supremacy Clause, which puts the federal government over our local governments. So political tools are non-existent. We're going to have to use non-political tools to mitigate the effects of what our federal government is doing to our citizens. Sweeps need public awareness. And deportations could use government intervention to help return deported citizens and green card residents back to the United States.
Eric Guerra, do you support the proposed citizens initiative to raise the sales tax in the city of Sacramento to increase transit and fix roads? Why or why not?
Yes, and the reason is because, number one, we see how dangerous our roads are, not only when you have potholes, and as a cyclist, when you're carrying your kids in a cargo bike, believe me, they remind you about that every time you hit a pothole, but also the need to fund our transit. To make sure that mobility is a real need and accessible for everyone of an all-age city. The measure allows us to fund not only support for pedestrians, but for transit, and also to make sure that our roads are safer when we're driving. The fact that we have our roads are depleting and damaged, it's going to cost us more in the long run. So I support the measure. I was one of the first signers when it came on, and as a county supervisor, the county is facing the same issue, and we need to make sure we support our county in educating them the need. In the county, it's not as popular. And the fact is, if you have, like our son was born in Kaiser Roseville, we had to drive over there. We have to use our county. We don't live in an isolated area of our county. So we need to make sure that once we pass this initiative, we also help support, as a county supervisor, help our other parts of our county so that we can support transit along the entire area. So it's not good enough for us to just fix here. Yes, we have to fix what we have first, but we have to support the rest of the county.
I'll be honest with you, I haven't read, or I don't know what the cost of this sales tax is or how long it is. I am not opposed to taxes. I've supported many a tax, but I'm also keenly aware of the discomfort of people with the economy and their ever increasing fees where they have a sense that they're not getting services for those fees. Hypothetically, I think it's sound, particularly since city and county government capital improvement project line items are getting thinner and thinner. More people are driving electric vehicles, so our gas tax is going down, but that shared obligation between the state and the city, I know that we're going to have several things on the ballots in November, and we are going to be competing with perhaps CSU Sacramento doing a local tax to do dormitories in downtown. We're going to, on our Los Rios Board of Trustees, we may be going out for a bond measure to do modernization and improvement of our existing infrastructure. I believe there's another local fee. So, you know, I'm generally in support of fees that relate to direct services. I don't know what the cost of this is, for how long, but I would want to look at what else is on the ballot before I commit to it, knowing that the consumer feels overwhelmed and not necessarily feeling like they're getting services for the fees that they're being charged.
I'm an avid bicyclist. I walk or ride my bike even to do errands like go to the grocery store. I'm always on bike lanes that are torn up with potholes, so it's in my self-interest that we have a bicycle-friendly community. A half-cent sales tax is expensive. We already pay 8.5% sales tax, so care should be given to increasing our sales tax revenue. One alternative that we haven't considered is having the Sacramento County increase its budgets for bicycle lanes and for road safety and for public transportation. If we can get the Sacramento, if elected, it will be my priorities and my self-interest to have a clean environment on our streets. So I will push for funding for road improvements, bike lanes for the entire county. If that's not possible, if it's not politically possible, then yes, half-cent sales tax for bike-friendly streets will be necessary.
Yes, I am supporting this, but I'm really angry about it. And I'll tell you why. So we currently have an 8.75% sales tax, and now we're going to go up to 9.25%. And it is directed, which means that these dollars can't be co-opted by the city for other purposes, which is what happened to all of us as voters with Measure U. I was the 4-term chair of the Measure U committee, and we were promised that those dollars were going to go certain places, and then the city council made decisions to not spend those dollars in accordance with what we all voted for in the vision that we had. So I am supportive of this because it is gonna go. There's no way that the council can override and spend it on whatever they want. But I'm angry about it because number one, sales taxes are regressive, which means our poorest members of our community spend a proportionately larger sum of their dollars on it. But I'm also angry because in 2016, I joined a committee known as the Sacramento Area Bicycle Advisory Committee, and it was a joint city and county initiative. And one of the things we were working on was trying to get the city and the county to work together to be able to come up with transit plans. And so it is frustrating to now hear us have to do this alone without the benefit of the county when the responsibility for transportation should be regional. That is a failure of our existing leadership, city and county. And so that's why I'm running for county supervisor, because we should not sit back and say, oh, just tax the city some more when we're already bearing the burden of homelessness and other services that we have to provide because the county won't show up, and say, well, county residents just don't want it, so oh well. Our job is to make the case for why these things are important, and that is a dereliction of duty for everybody who is in office right now to have not done.
Please watch Evelyn there with her stop sign. Deborah Ortiz. Many feel the county has not done its job in dealing with the homeless crisis. Do you agree? And how would you change that? What solutions do you offer, both the short and the long term?
I think many feel that our whole region hasn't done enough. I frequently share with people that the county has an obligation to do particularly services, health and human services, behavioral health, mental health, substance use treatment, public health, that 60% of their budget is mandated on essentially parts of the state statutes that require them to do certain things. Do I believe they should do things differently in terms of providing services? Yes. I think they should double their caseworkers. They should train them and to go out more specifically to the hardest cases in the community. They should get shelter versus long-term housing. People need to get out of the elements. We need to adopt an understanding that success means a handful of people getting off the streets and into treatment, and that there will be relapses and setbacks, and that, you know, someone who comes from a family of, sadly, two heroin users who lost their lives to years of addiction, I understand that it's not a simple solution. Finding people when they're ready for treatment and keeping them in treatment is a huge challenge. So yes, the county can do more, so can the city. The city doesn't have an obligation to do services, the county does. Both of those parties need to do more. Shelter, and more importantly, there needs to be the will of the board of supervisors, 3 votes to dedicate a line item consistently, not stray from that, to commit to services.
Sacramento County spends $220 million a year whacking at the symptoms of homelessness. Instead, the root cause of homelessness needs to be addressed. The root cause of homelessness is lack of employability in our technology-based economy. Also, Sacramento County spends $140 million a year subsidizing special assessment districts. Those monies should instead be focused to build, manage, staff, supply Sacramento dorms, a 5,000-room homeless dormitory having an environment of education, with tutors helping residents relearn the basic skills. They'll be treated as adults. The skills need to be from the very beginning again. Sentence is a subject and a predicate. Subject is an article and a noun. A predicate is a verb and an object. An object is an article and a noun. Just start from the beginning again and learn the basic skills to become employable in our technology-based economy.
On the question of whether the county has pulled its weight, the answer is no. And we all see that and feel that. Everything from the fact that we had to bring in the head of those Prop 63, the mental health services dollars, to say that we weren't spending our dollars on mental health and they were going to be taken back by the state. That happened not that long ago. The fact that we don't draw down all of the CalAIM wraparound dollars that we're eligible for to be able to help our Medi-Cal patients to get housing and some of the services that they need. We're leaving money on the table. The fact that even during COVID, $300 million that we got from the federal government to manage COVID went to the sheriffs for months instead of going to public health so that we could address COVID-19, including in our unhoused population. Our county has over and over again demonstrated a lack of leadership and a wasteful approach and an unwillingness to work together with the other partners in the region. And that has made it so that this problem that we're all trying to fight for is not working well together. So what do we need to do moving forward? Well, first of all, we need to have all of our county teams and staff working in the same direction. We can't have people working at cross purposes. We need to not leave any dollars on the table that we're eligible for so we can focus on this problem. And we need to make sure that we have people who actually have expertise in this leading the charge and making sure this is a priority. And that's why I'm running for county supervisor, because we need someone like me who actually has direct experience doing outreach to be able to bring these teams together and address these structural issues.
The county most recently received a C grade by the state on this issue, and some people say that that would be generous, and that's frankly because it has a failed disjointed system. The reality is when I've talked to everyone involved in this section, there's an agreement that there are three things that need to happen: a place to call, a person to respond, and a place to go. And right now, our 911 and 988 aren't coordinated. I would immediately make sure, and not even waiting, that already started to make sure how we combine 988 and 911. So there's an immediate response, whether it's a 911 call for police or the sheriff, but also a mental health expert, so that we can get our homeless engagement and response team out there immediately. And then work with, as a county supervisor, work with our other cities so that there's a county clinician with those the police departments and law enforcement or firefighters, so that they're not going to the county jail and being released in downtown Sacramento, so that they go to the crisis receiving center, which I voted to fund, to get them immediate mental health and substance abuse treatment. And also, just this week, we broke ground on what will be over 200 beds of mental health and substance abuse treatment here in my own council district that'll service the county as well. And that opportunity to also, for people who can't make a decision for themselves, get them in front of a judge, get them so that we can put together an ability for them to see whether they can manage themselves or not. I would create a standing committee, as I've talked to the social workers here at UC Davis Health, to be able to meet with them individually so that they can get them signed up.
Tim Riley, what would you do to improve public transportation throughout the county?
Well, I'm very anti-automobile. Like I said earlier, I try my hardest to walk, ride my bike, or use public transportation to get around. That is my lifestyle. The public transportation has its own funding plan. We have a special district and taxes that go towards funding the public transportation in Sacramento County. So Sacramento County government as an organization doesn't really have any jurisdiction. So that would have to be another organization to fight for.
I previously served on the Active Transportation Commission and also on the Mayor's Joint Climate Commission. And so one of the challenges that we're always facing is that we absolutely need to address public transit, both for lifestyle as well as for climate goals. And so part of the challenge and part of the plan we need to have is to build a system for 2026 and beyond. We do not have that system set up right now. We don't have a way to get from basic places where we live to basic places we want to go. To to move our entire arena downtown for our light rail to even begin to make sense to move people to our major points of destination. So part of what we're talking about here is route optimization. When we know where our students live and where they go to school, we need to have routes that can get them back and forth. We know where people live and where they work. We need to have routes to get people back and forth. We need to invest more in protected bus lanes so those buses that are more nimble than our light rail system, because we don't have to run new tracks and have setbacks, can actually be able to get somewhere without sitting in the same traffic as the cars. We need to build a system that actually makes sense right now, and we actually have the fleet and the ability to do that, but we have not had the leadership and the forethought to be able to say, how do we build a system that more people can use because it's functional? When I was out knocking doors this weekend, I talked to a person who said they can get to their job in 40 minutes on their bike, but it takes 2.5 hours on public transit. Make that make sense for me. How can I get there faster on my bike than taking public transit? Those are the problems that we need to fix, and that's my commitment, is that we're going to start with route optimization.
Well, first of all, this is something that I have already started working on because I helped create the city and county and regional transit agreement to start a protected bus lane on Stockton Boulevard. And not only that, recognizing that the only way to make public transit work is to change our land use pattern. This is why I've led the effort on corridor revitalization, building housing where transit is, not building housing where you can't get transit. That's the only way you're actually going to make transit be able to work in its way. And you see it down Stockton Boulevard already. The 51 is the most effective and highly utilized corridor where you can get anywhere in the city in 35 minutes by using that bus lane because of the way it's designed and created. As a county supervisor, I would have the county support other programs like JIBE as well, and also to make sure that we change the RT policy. Let me give you an experience. If you have a stroller and you go onto the bus, they make you tear down your stroller and hold your child before you can get up there. How are you ever going to get accustomed to be able to get young people and young families into the RT system? We have to make sure that we change those policies, because if not, what does a young family do? They buy an SUV with a car seat, and then those kids growing up not learning how to use that bus system. We have to make a bus system and a transit system that's for all ages, for every stage of our life to be able to participate in it.
So there are various elements to why our public transit system doesn't work. It's the economics. Ridership is down. Much of it due to safety issues. The lack of federal funding and state funding and declining dollars to sustain our public transportation system. We have an issue of equity. Some of the poorest communities are the least served, which is kind of cyclical. If it's not a well-served, safe system, and it doesn't quickly take persons to employment centers or to school, then it's not going to have ridership. So we have a huge problem with equity of where our bus lines are, and they're the first ones to be cut. Sustainability, we do not have sustainable funding systems. What we have done at Los Rios Community College District is we've ensured that we have light rail stations at our Cosumnes River College, at Sac City College, Folsom Lake College. So I understand that planners can select and identify appropriate land use decisions to encourage ridership. On the Planning Commission, I've actually voted against a couple of projects that were in the line of a corridor to do light rail out to the airport in Natomas. But many people argued, rightfully so, this has been on the planning for 20 years, and when is it going to be built? So that's our challenge here. Lack of confidence, lack of equity in our system, lack of sustainability, and that absolutely needs to be changed.
Flo Cofer, do you support the Army Corps of Engineers plan to remove hundreds of trees from the American River Parkway to strengthen the levee?
So this is always a difficult decision because we're talking about cutting down trees and there's an environmental impact to that. And the truth of the matter is that we have made some poor planning decisions in building houses in places that are part of our floodplain, and that shouldn't have happened, but it has now. And so we have to be able to protect the infrastructure that we built. And so my understanding is that based on what we've allocated in our budget, this is the most economical way of doing things. But the question becomes, what are the consequences? And so that's really where this becomes a difficult yes, but a yes. But that's part of the reason why when we were talking earlier about the Natomas Basin, that we can't go back and redo some of the challenges of where we chose to build, New Orleans and Sacramento and DC, but we can't decide where we build moving forward. And that's why I'm so opposed to these projects that are violating the basic principles of where we should build and where our floodplain is going to be and how we're going to protect our environment. Because we have to protect what we already have, but we don't have to keep making the same mistakes moving forward. So I am a reluctant but unfortunate yes on this.
Well, safety should be first, but as a trained engineer, I would have asked, and what are the alternatives? And not having gone through the analysis, and seen what the viable alternatives are, that's what the questions I would have asked. But now I have talked to some of the folks where they have ripped out part of the trees and they're growing back. Believe me, I lived off of the American River in the flood of '97, and I watched the water seeping through the gopher holes that were going through there. So I do fear about what those issues are. So I lean first, yes, on safety first, but I have to ask, what were the viable alternatives? Were there ways to manage some of the tree growth in that process? I'm not a civil engineer, I'm an electrical engineer, so I'm not going to question their expertise on this, but I would have asked, show the alternative approach.
I would say, Sacramento is a city of two rivers that has always historically been in the greatest flood risk in the country. And we built our city close to the Sacramento River as well as the American River. Many of the risky areas now that are in question are actually up the American River. Natomas actually has greater protection than many parts of our region, and we will continue to sustain that and pay for that. But many of those communities were indeed there well before we understood the significant risk. We know the risk now. New Orleans, and we have state funding from the Department of Water Resources that is being litigated and held up. And sadly, it's devastating for me to see the loss of incredible trees. But it is a critical public safety issue, and the longer we delay in ensuring and shoring up those very neighborhoods where people are opposed to losing trees, their lives are at risk. So it's a practical reality of how our city has been built up over decades since the beginning. And indeed, trees do grow. They may not see it in the lifetime of those who are seeing them taken down. The appropriate vegetation there to prevent burrowing, to prevent erosion. We know enough now to know what we must do, and we must sustain those levees, and we must protect life and safety.
Well, this certainly is a conflict. Of course, we don't want floods. And as an environmentalist, of course, I love trees. I'll admit it. I'm a tree hugger. Trees near the levees, roots and the roots make the levees vulnerable. So it's definitely a pickle. There's public information that one of the trees slated to be cut down is a 300-year-old oak tree. Now, that's a very sad thought to have to ponder. So there's no easy answer on this. I have to trust the goodwill of the Army Corps of Engineers. I have to trust that they're looking after our best interests, and the decisions they make, I have to believe that are in the best interests of both the environment and our public safety.
Eric Guerra. We know the lack of affordable homes for purchase and rent is at a crisis proportion across the state and here. What will you do to stimulate production of more affordable homes and rentals stock as a county supervisor?
Great. Thank you. First, there's two parts to this. One, on the city side, I created the Tenant Protection Program. And that helped stabilize and create rights and for renters as well. And it also created an affirmative defense for those landlords that didn't follow the program as well, for those who were in an unlawful detainer. Second, I encourage you to drive down Stockton Boulevard if you haven't. I've taken an aggressive approach of building affordable housing, to finding ways to work with property owners and community in places where there's also transit, because the two highest income costs to families are the cost of housing and the cost of transportation. Second, it's looking at programs like the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District. As I'm working with Supervisor or Councilmember Dixon, who was a supervisor and who has endorsed me, to look at ways to reduce the cost of construction, because before you can put up a door or a window, the sewer, water, and electrical is already outpricing everything. As a county supervisor, I would look at programs like the Green Means Go, which I have to say were started out of the visions of Stockton Boulevard from our efforts to reduce those costs. San Juan Motel, that will be groundbreaking soon, is an example of that, how we're building affordable housing. Also, different types of housing. One of the benefits that we've seen and what we've created is that we've started housing with different sizes for different income levels. Not everybody can start in a 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath garage. We need options for people.
Thank you for that reminder. I think the question is, what would I do to stimulate more affordable housing? I'll share with you, serving on the Planning Commission has been a wonderful experience. You know, we took the leadership, and I took a tough vote in 2 instances. Some would consider one was a tough vote. Contrary to community opposition, I supported a project in East Sacramento that does high density, probably 362 units between the freeway and Alhambra Boulevard. State law now dictates that we must build, and CEQA cannot be used as an impediment to that. Density is great, even in the neighborhood I live in. I also supported, opposed an effort for a developer in Crocker Village to downzone from what he agreed to do in high multifamily unit market rate, not even low and very low income, who had sought to downsize it to single family development. So those decisions were easy ones for me, because we need an array of housing stock. What do I think municipalities should do? There are cities, Los Angeles, Bay Area, where when cities and municipalities dedicate a funding stream to subsidize low and very low income developers to build new housing, that's the only way it gets built. Our city could have been doing this for decades. I served on the council when we had an inclusionary zoning policy that ultimately went away. Those are 2 ways to improve housing in our region.
The supply-demand curve of the housing market will dictate its production and price level. When I was born in 1960, the planet had 3 billion residents. In 12 years from now, the planet is expected to hit 9 billion residents. So in my lifetime, the human population will triple. That is increasing the demand for housing. The supply of housing is taking place. It is increasing. I'm witnessing it personally in North Natomas. The economics of the market are working, and new apartments and housing developments are taking place in North Natomas, and that will increase the housing supply and will stabilize the housing costs and the rental costs.
So in the county of Sacramento, we have, according to ECOS, 140,000 units of housing that we have approved but have not started construction. So the question starts into why, right? And a lot of it has to do with money. And so that's one of the reasons why I am so supportive of a public bank. We only have one in the entire United States, and it's in North Dakota. It's been around for over 100 years. And basically what it means is that instead of, right now, us us taking that $9.2 billion and investing it in private banks, many of which are invested in fossil fuels, so operating against our climate goals, and basically enriching private shareholders that don't live in Sacramento. All of those fees, all of the interest that we pay would be reinvested right here, which means the county of Sacramento would probably have closer to $10 billion without having to ask anyone in this room for a dollar more. And so what that does is it opens us up to have more opportunities to be able to control the financing locally, to be able to invest in projects, not because they make someone who doesn't live here extra money, but because they're good for Sacramento and we can invest. Our state has already allowed this, and in fact, is looking at how to invest its hundreds of billions of dollars in a state bank with legislation that I'll be speaking on behalf of on April 22nd. And so I'm excited to bring that proposal and to work with Supervisor Pat Hume to be able to bring that to the county of Sacramento, because North Dakota is not exactly a blue state. So this is a great bipartisan proposal that the Republicans and the Democrats on the county supervisors can work together on. So those are the kinds of things that allow us to be able to have greater opportunities. And my commitment is on day one that we will have that feasibility study ready for me and my colleagues to vote on.
Deborah Ortiz. What can be done at the local level about the cost of elections and the influence of money in political decisions that you will face as a county supervisor?
Repeat the first part.
What can be done at the local level about the cost of elections and the influence of money in political decisions you will face as a county supervisor?
Well, I assume you're talking about the cost of campaigns versus the actual running. Okay. What can be done about the cost of campaigns? Believe me, as the person who's probably raised the least amount, well, I don't know about Tim, but I'm struggling because I don't get big money or special interest, but thank God for my friends and family. Public financing. We absolutely should have public financing for campaigns so that everybody's got a level playing field. Talking to X number of thousands of voters doesn't get done by bodies alone. It does require publication of materials. I have an all-volunteer campaign. Thank God, they're awesome, amazing people. But I've run big campaigns as well, where when I ran for the Senate, that was an expensive. So public financing, criteria that suggest easier ways of delivering information directly to voters. We're not at electronic voting yet, but at some point in the future when we can validate voting machines to be able to talk directly, to ensure that there's no ability to have them tampered with, directly communicating with those very same voters, having those voter files free so that everybody can utilize them and talk directly to voters either through text or emails. That's a long way away. It's a pipe dream, but the first start is a level playing field for everybody to allow public financing.
I can't speak for the establishment, but what I can speak for is my own personal campaign. I am not taking any contributions, period. I am funding from my retirement account my entire campaign. At the same time, I'm running a frugal campaign. I'm not hiring any employees, and I'm not hiring any contractor to manage my campaign. Instead, I'm going door to door, handing out my 3-penny leaflets and getting to know the voters as I pass them on the sidewalks. So it's been 250 years, more than 250, almost 250 years, our democracy. And ever since we've had elections, we've had this controversy. So I can't speak for other people's attempted fix for this problem. What I can do is speak for myself and my own personal actions to live every day with the feeling of relief that I am not beholden to anybody at the end of this campaign.
The cost of campaigns are high because corporations are people, because Citizens United, right? And we have dark money that can spend as much as they want to, and having been the targeted attack of some pretty mean and untruthful, mailers, and likely ones that are coming very soon, I can say that that is one of the problems in politics, because it weeds out very good people who want to be part of our political process, but don't want to have their neighbors and friends lied to, don't want to have, elections attorneys taking them to court to sue them over their ballot designations. It's obnoxious, and it means that we don't get the best people available. So I certainly agree that we absolutely should be able to have, publicly funded elections. But beyond that, we also can make personal commitments. I don't take corporate money because I want to make sure I'm representing the people here. We do draw on volunteers. We do draw on people from the community to be a part of these elections. But we also can take a stance. I don't run negative mailers against my opponents because we're all neighbors and because I think that undermines our democracy. I think we get the opportunity to sign and say we're going to be good candidates or not. We get the opportunity to be able to say who we want to be and how we show up in the world. So the reason that these campaigns cost a lot is because, just like with the public bank, we have a bunch of people who don't live here who infuse a bunch of dollars in because they see you as a bunch of marks, and they want to make money off of you, and they want to take our resources, and they don't want to see our communities actually thrive and have the things that we need. And the more we're able to stand up against that, the better our local elections will be.
Well, number one, I support public financing as well, and I think all of us would appreciate the fact that if we had that, we could get Citizens United. I wish Citizens United didn't even exist, and it has destroyed, I think, not only in California, but nationally changed our how people feel. But the second piece I also feel is we have to do also a better job starting earlier on creating a culture of becoming civically aware, making young kids and young people learn how to find information. I support the work that the League of Women Voters have always done to make information available, to making sure that people can get information that is trusted without all this campaign literature and mails or even social media ads or even what candidates put out there. I appreciate the work that those civic organizations do. And then finally, support organizations like Access Sacramento. As a former cable commissioner, that was one of the things that I always supported, was making sure that we had funding for Access Sacramento. I'm very disappointed that the commission right now has decided to cut them in half, because we wouldn't have, if that continues, we won't have the opportunity to have events like this that actually educate community. When I was on the cable commission there, I was supporting the increase to make sure that we had public access to education. It's not full public financing, but it at least gets access to people so they can talk to their elected officials, they can get civic information in a way that is unbiased and doesn't have any influence in it.
Tim Riley, as a county supervisor, will you be able to have any, quote, control, unquote, over the sheriff's department through the budget process?
The county funds the sheriff's department. It's a big line item on the budget. Of course, we need police protection. That's all I can add. Police protection is good, and the county funds it. And of course, there needs to be more funding. You cannot have too much police protection, but that's all. That's as much value as I can add to the question.
The sheriff's position is elected countywide, so there's not the same oversight of the sheriff for the county supervisors as there is for the police chief in a city. But there are responsibilities that our county supervisors have over the sheriff, in particular the budget, right? How much money is spent, and also on policy. How do we govern ourselves? How do we move forward as a county in terms of our safety policies? I actually happen to have served for 4 years on the Sheriff's Outreach Community Advisory Board when Scott Jones was our sheriff. And so we had a lot of these conversations about what was needed. And at the time, you all will probably remember, the sheriff locked out the Inspector General, former Police Chief Rick Brazil, and there was a lot of controversy and back and forth. There's a new iteration of that actual commission, and they now have subpoena ability, they can request records, they can engage more in the policy to be able to bring recommendations to our county Board of Supervisors. And so that's something that I'm really interested in, because our community members, especially those who volunteer their time, should have their expertise respected and have their policy recommendations heard. And we've seen it happen too often in both our city and our county, where we have really dedicated people who are smart and thoughtful, who come up with good ideas for how we can protect our community, and then we take no action on them whatsoever. So my commitment to you is that we're going to use all of those levers, our budget, our policy, and also our Outreach Community Advisory Commission, to be able to make sure that we are thinking thoughtfully about how to move this forward. And I'm looking forward to especially working with Supervisor Desmond, who's a 24-year CHP, on how we can move these things forward together.
Every department needs to have strong accountability. And every department also needs to look at how it's going to operate for the future. In fact, even now, working with our police department and many of our small businesses, all of us that live in Tahoe Park were just crushed when we heard that, Bacon and Butter and Sac City Brews and Milano's Pizzas were broken into. Well, the advancements that we have now with being able to work with them and having our department go there and work with those business owners to get cameras and get connected with real-time observation with our police department is new ways that we can connect. At the Sheriff's Department, we should be doing the same thing, looking at what are the new ways that we can ensure public safety, because there is no possible way to have an office every single part of our county. It's just very large. So we need to figure out better ways of that. But all departments, when they come through the budget process, have to have strong accountability. Now, I worked with our city's police commission and advisory commission, and many of our commissioners here, to start building that relationship with those departments. And that's the strength that I have. I've always sat down with community members, with our commissioners. As a former commissioner myself, citizens commissioner that gave up my nights free, my Monday nights for free, now I appreciate that engagement that I take to have our public servants that work for the public and our public servants who are advisory to be able to work with our elected officials. And as a county supervisor, I'd work with them all to make that decision correctly.
This district is unique in that probably 98% of District 1 is actually in the city of Sacramento. So it's serviced by the police department. But obviously a supervisor has obligation for the countywide issues as well as a county budget, including the sheriff's department. The sheriff is elected independently, so there's no direct oversight by the county administrator over how the sheriff does his job. The only way to incentivize direct force policy changes is through the budget. The major part of, I think, the concern of the sheriff is indeed compensation, pensions for those sheriffs, and those are very expensive issues, very expensive benefits. It's challenging for elected officials to say no sometimes, but when I was on the city council, as well as what we do at Los Rios with our police department, is we work collaboratively with the leadership. We make sure that our budget can sustain pensions, the employer obligation part of it, and you incentivize reforms. We've adopted policies where our police chief cannot collaborate with us. Those are the same kinds of policies that a governing board can indeed direct policy-wise, and the incentive for the sheriff to do those things is that they want the compensation and the funding for their budget. So that's the only way to leverage them.
Flo Cofer, would you help establish a safe ground in the county to give the unhoused an undisturbed location and services without waiting for housing to be built?
So this is the question that we always have to answer, because every day we have determined more and more of our city and our county are places where people can't go. We've decided City Hall is a place where people can't sleep overnight. We've decided that most of the city is critical infrastructure. And now we've decided that even private citizens can't allow people to sleep on their property in the county. So the question becomes, where do people who have mass and occupy space go when they have nowhere else to go? And that is the key question we are responsible for answering, because otherwise it is cruel and inhumane. Now, back when we had a Supreme Court that we could actually rely on to make good decisions, they said that. They specifically said to us that it is cruel and inhumane to move people without having a place to go. So our responsibility as your leaders is to make sure that place is not your front porch or your backyard, which has happened to me multiple times. That we actually have a place for people to go where they can get needed services and where we can help to stabilize them. So yes, we have to answer the question that has to be answered, which is, where can people go when they have nowhere else to go? We have county property. If we say you can't be on private property, if we say everything else is critical infrastructure, if we say our public buildings are off limits, where can you go if you have nowhere else to go? That is not an answer that we can just leave lingering, and it has been lingering for far too long, and we've used our jail as the answer to it, we've used our emergency room as the answer to it, and we've relied on our fire and our police department and our sheriffs to be the ones at the most expense to all of us to not answer this question until 200 people every year die on our streets. Enough.
Well, first, we're already testing a safe ground with the city and the River District, and we're looking at what are the essentials if that is successful. And as a county supervisor, I would look at that example because, you know, as someone who lived on the street and in my car, I also know how dangerous and how unpredictable it can be and how the weather and the elements can affect you. But the one thing that when we have people out there, and I've gone out there with our community workers every day, and every time I've gone out there and talked to them, and as someone who lived on the street and saw this, the majority of the people who continue in that have severe mental health issues, they have substance abuse issues, they have lost the safety net, and this is where we have to, as a county, focus not just on a place to go, because frankly, there are places they should not go. They shouldn't be near schools, in our parks. Camping shouldn't be around childcare centers. I think we need to take hard lines on those situations. But we do need to have health and resources for people, because there are people who can't make a decision for themselves anymore. And this is why I want to, as a supervisor, I'll have our county clinicians working with all our outreach people. Again, you have to have a place to call when someone needs help, a person to respond, and a place to go. But that place to go should be a place that's going to help people for that next step, not to continue the situation that they're in. Our focus on the county should be immediately and with urgency to do what the voters said with Prop 1, and that is address the mental health and substance abuse issue we have on our street.
I think the safe ground option should be shelters that we are building, and we need to build more. The county is on pace to build sites. The city is on pace to build sites. These are sites that, whether one agrees with the delegation of the authority to the city manager, or whether you agree with the pace of what the county is doing, particularly up and down Stockton Boulevard, Watt Avenue, Old Roseville Road, even those are controversial. Even now you have some parts of the city suing to reject what they agree to procedurally to delegate it to the county or to the city manager. So we are on pace for what I consider truly safe places, which are options out of the elements in shelter, and we should stay on pace with those. Other sites that are not regulated, or that, you know, God bless people who have a horrible situation, you do that by getting a team of caseworkers, multi-services to go in and to provide them with options. And God forbid there aren't options because we can't keep up pace, then damn it, spend the money and, you know, put them in hotels. Do not have them living on the street. It's inhumane. So no, we have an obligation to find shelter that is safe, that has bathrooms, that has showers, and I don't care if that costs us a hell of a lot more money than we're spending now. We put them into hotels. We do not leave them outside in the elements. That is absolutely inhumane.
Sacramento dorms will have all the services in one place. The services will include mental health. Services will include substance detoxification. And the services will include positive activities to gain personal skills. Sacramento dorms will take advantage of the economies of scale. If you provide these services for a small group of people, it's very expensive. If you provide these services for a large group of services, you've got economy of scale. Sacramento dorms will also provide economies of scope. If you're going to provide some services for the homelessness, that's expensive. If you add multiple services in one place, then you've got economies of scope. So an efficient solution to our homeless problem is Sacramento dorms.
Eric Guerra. State officials have brought back the Delta Tunnel Plan. It calls for construction of a 45-mile tunnel to divert water from the Sacramento River to communities and farms in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. What's your stance on the Delta Tunnel project?
I've opposed the Delta Tunnel project very publicly as a council member and even as a chair of the Air District, because when we looked at that analysis of just that construction project and the amount of, just on the construction side, the dust and the impact that it would have to the surrounding areas, when at that time we weren't even at federal attainment, it would set us back in a health standard. Yes, there is an issue where we have to manage our water better. Yes, we have to be good stewards of the limited resources we have with our water, but the Delta tunnels are not the answer. And with that, when I was on multiple joint powers authorities with county supervisors, with other city officials, I worked collaboratively with them to have a strong position opposing the Delta tunnels.
Short answer, absolutely crazy idea. There should be no one that has ever read the implications for these, the cost, the implications to the environment, the transporting of water long distances that compromise our region. Absolutely not. I'm opposed to them.
The Delta Tunnel Plan is bad. The environment is important, and anything that disrupts the natural flow of our waterways is bad.
Yeah, this is an area where we're all going to agree, because this is a really, really terrible plan for all the reasons that have already been named. But especially, it's important, again, that we are living by our values. And so these are not in accordance to our values. This plan is really, really detrimental, and it's not something that I would ever support.
Thank you for those short answers. And we're going to get in one more question in that case, and full agreement, I would add. So this one is for you, Deborah Ortiz. Interpersonal gun violence is often concentrated in under-resourced neighborhoods where cycles of violence, injury, trauma, and retaliation have devastating effects. How can you address this as a county supervisor?
Well, I will tell you something I did when I was on the Sacramento City Council. Some of you may remember. And it was controversial. I had to bring the item back 3 times. Finally got it passed, but we passed an ordinance that required gun dealers to register with the police department. We required that they not be near parks or schools. This is the early period of gun violence. I had death threats as a result of this. I continue to support all efforts to curtail gun violence when I was in the Assembly and the Senate. What would I do as a supervisor? I think, sadly, we're in a reactionary mode where you need to ensure that you have adequate law enforcement, whether it's the police or the sheriff, quickly responding to communities that are at the greatest risk. They often wait hours for police response or sheriff's response. I support the use of the sharpshooter mechanisms to quickly, respond to gunshots so that they can respond more timely. I think we need to have accountability and measure response time of sheriff and police. Again, sheriffs are the county. Bulk of this district is in the city police department, so I can't regulate that. but there needs to be a means of measuring response time in those underserved communities. You know, it is probably one of the greatest challenges of our generation that we have yet to solve.
Gun ownership is a federal issue, and because of the clause, we're at the mercy of our federal government. It's unfortunate that we have more guns than people in the United States. It's a self-evident problem, and the political tools at our disposal are none, because the federal government is in charge and seems to be in an environment, a culture, a gun culture that is, well, in my opinion, disappointing. But of course, there are too many guns. There should not be, dare I say it, no guns. I'm personally afraid of them. I've worked at a convenience store and twice had a gun held in my head. So it's in my self-interest and it's in my personality to have safe neighborhoods without guns.
So gun violence is a public health problem. And we actually have a gun violence research center right here at UC Davis that studies this and looks at the patterns of gun violence. And we actually have good models already right here in Sacramento. For 2 years, from 2017 to 2020, we had no youth homicides in the city of Sacramento. And that was because we had a violence prevention network of working around, who were keeping their ear to the ground, who were talking to the folks who were most likely to be using guns and most likely to be engaged in conflicts, and they were able to de-escalate. And what happened right when COVID happened, and they said, hey, all the drivers of violence are going up. Kids aren't in school, people aren't at work, right? There's all of these things that are known risk factors. Instead of continuing to fund these, we sort of just network. And so we have not gone 2 years without youth homicide since then. And so my commitment is to making sure that we are investing in the things that work, because I know that nobody in this room woke up this morning hoping to call 911. If you do, it means something went wrong. And so public safety is not just who responds when you call, which is certainly important. It's also whether you have to call in the first place. And we had a time for multiple years where we didn't have to make those calls. I want to go back to that time, because that was a time when kids were not burying their friends, when there were no numbers hung up on Sac High's fence at the end of the day, you know, showing who wasn't going to be there for graduation that year. This is a key concern, and we can invest in this, and it's much cheaper than responding after someone has been killed. And that is the investment that we need to make in the county of Sacramento, along with the city of Sacramento.
Well, this is where lived experience is all too real. I'm probably the only candidate here who's had a gun pointed to their face multiple times, not only as a teenager, but as an adult. Or did you say that, Tim? I didn't hear that. You know, I didn't hear that, Tim. But yeah, well, here, so Tim and I have something in common, and I didn't know we did. But, you know, and to that point, not only has that occurred, and knowing that fear, but even as a homeowner in Tahoe Park, when we had someone unload 22 rounds in front of our house on an evening. You know, the reality is, I agree with Tim here, and I agree with Deborah, we have to have adequate law enforcement to respond in those situations. We have to support policies that help us identify like ShotSpotter, because let me tell you, when in communities, when you're afraid to report a crime, you don't even report when you hear a gunfire or any of those issues, and it becomes all too natural. So we need to have that, and also our police and sheriff officers should also feel safe that they get to come home. Now, getting to the point of engagement, those experiences as a young kid, as a teenager, seeing what was happening. One, either how did they access that gun? Poor gun ownership responsibility. I wrote an ordinance that later became state law before we passed it to require safe storage and locking in the city. Now it's state law. I worked with Moms Demand Action on that piece. And second, yes, I agree that we need to fund the youth engagement. In fact, I was involved with Supervisor Jennings to get that funding for youth engagement.
Thank you. Okay, the one question we didn't get to, and hopefully the candidates will hang out afterwards if if the person who asked this is here, it's about the fireworks and the illegal fireworks, that is, and the follow the source approach to that. So we'll go to closing remarks now in reverse alphabetical order. Tim Riley, you're first. 1 minute. 1 minute.
In my 65 years of life, I developed two important skills. Number one, I can articulate context and nuance. Number two, I am not a group thinker. Instead, I'm a critical thinker. You don't want a representative who joins the groupthink of the supervisor culture. Instead, you want a critical thinker who will transform the culture to value education. Vote for me to be the newest member on our Board of Supervisors.
Deborah Ortiz.
This is a pivotal point in our city, in our region. This election of this person, this seat, could indeed shift what has been kind of an invisible body that has made decisions that are not quite as, I would say, progressive as they should be. As someone who's lived in Sacramento for 5 generations, I've seen the American dream with my own family. My grandparents moved out of the fields, my aunts and uncles into the canneries, my cousins and others into the state service, and myself as a state senator. That dream has been lost. I hope that you have great candidates here. One of us will be able to make a change in our region. And I hope that you decide that I'm the one that brings the greatest experience, example of tangible wins in my career that are based on core working class values to speak to the most vulnerable in our region at a time when we're going to see historic losses in health and human services.
Guerra.
I'm very proud of my record of working with community. I started off in the neighborhoods and neighborhood leaders. That approach of bringing people to the table, listening to different points of view, is the approach that I will take to the County Board of Supervisors to make a change with the County Board of Supervisors. When we have different opinions and we can move that forward, we can do that, which is why I'm endorsed by a very diverse set of communities, from the Executive Director of NorCal Resist to Sheriff Jim Cooper, from labor unions to business to many neighborhood association leaders who are here today that have worked with me before I even was elected. I will take that approach with the County Board of Supervisors to break that logjam, to start working together, and to change the direction of Sacramento County, and I'd be honored to earn your vote for County Supervisor.
Flo Cofer.
What I've learned about Sacramento is that most of us agree on what we want, right? Safety and jobs and housing and health. But our political fights are often about not different goals, but what we think is possible and what we're willing to settle for. Leaders don't tell you what we can't do. They figure out how to do what we need to do. And that's what I'm committed to. You've heard from me a forward-thinking agenda, not of just what I've done in the past, but my vision for what Sacramento can be when we pay attention and when I bring you along with me. In 2024, I ran a values-driven, multi-ethnic, multi-generational, joyful campaign for mayor. And I did it as my authentic self, right down to my Bantu knots and my big earrings. And I got the best endorsement ever. 94,495 people in Sacramento voted for me, and 57,149 of them are in District 1. And so I'm asking for your vote again, because I want to bring that same energy, that same light, that same vision to the County of Sacramento as we face challenges with public health, as we face challenges from the federal government. And I would love to earn your support and be your partner as we do this together.
Before I do my thank yous, how about a round of applause? Running for office is no easy task. So thank you very, very much for this public service. And thank you to the audience for your civic engagement and your good questions. And thank you to all the volunteers that put this together in the league. And want to remind you that, believe it or not, the ballots go out in 4 weeks. So if you're not registered, you can do that at the back table there with Claudia. And before I say, I'm going to say goodnight right now and turn it back to Maggie.
Thank you. Let's give the candidates another big hand. And also, again, I want to thank the Coloma Center staff for all their help in setting this up. And Access Sacramento for filming, so this will be recorded. You can watch it again. You can share it with other people. I want to thank again the other neighborhood associations, our team that put this together, all their volunteers, and of course the League of Women Voters. And as you've got some time where you can talk to each other, you can talk to the candidates. Make your way to the back. Please help us cover the expenses of the forum by putting some money in the white buckets. Thank you very much.